Ladies and gentlemen, we continue. As we reflect on how cooperation can bridge divides and reinforce the international order, we now turn to a region where these questions take on an especially urgent role. Our next session, a special edition of Deutsche's Welle Conflict Zone, looks at these shifting global power dynamics in the Middle East. Please join me in warmly welcoming Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and Sarah Kelly, host of the Conflict Zone. Please. Thank you.
Please.
Please.
Hi, everyone. Ayman Safadi, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Last week, the UN Security Council endorsed Trump's 20-point peace plan for Gaza to much acclaim. Is this the plan that you want?
It is a plan that achieved our immediate priorities at the time of ending the war in Gaza, ending the starvation of the people of Gaza, and ending the further creation of conditions that would have been conducive to the displacement of Palestinians. It was the only game in town, and I think President Trump said unequivocally that he wants to achieve peace, and we support that effort.
Is it the deal to end the conflict?
Is it?
Is it the deal to end the conflict? Is it good
so
enough?
Far,
is it strong
look,
enough?
I mean, so far, again, in terms of the priorities, I think we are there, and I think the point of departure for all of us in the region, in consultation with the Americans and our European partners, that the immediate priority is in the slaughter of Palestinians, in the starvation, allow aid in, and restore hope to the people. That said, the ceasefire is there now. It is being broken by Israel, unfortunately. We have to stabilize that as a priority. We have to look at sufficient security mechanism that would ensure security for both Palestinians and the Israelis. And we'll have to look at a governance structure that would allow us to move forward on a path towards stabilization. And that is going to take a lot of work by all of us, and all of us are engaged. And I think to the extent that this is a common objective of all of us, what remains now is how do we engage together? How do we come up with workable ideas? How do we increase the workability of the plan by making sure that we move on the ground in a way that is conducive to the objectives I've just mentioned, and also that would restore hope to the people?
And we will be drilling down into some of those details, in fact. But first, let's bring it into the big picture and establish where all of this is going, because one of the biggest demands from fellow Arab states and yourself is that the path be paved for Palestinian statehood, ultimately. This Trump peace plan, it doesn't strongly commit to a two-state solution. It says, and I'm quoting here, when the Palestinian Authority reform program is faithfully carried out, the conditions may finally be in place for a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Are you satisfied with that?
Look, ultimately, I think the majority of the world, as we've seen expressed by the further recognition of Palestine by a lot of countries, including European countries, agree that the two-state solution is the only path to the just and lasting peace, to which we in Jordan and along with other Arab partners have been working non-stop over the years. So this is the only path to peace. However, we know realistically that this is, particularly now, is not the time to implement the two-state solution. But what we say to all our partners that if this is not the time to implement the two-state solution, then definitely this is the time to protect the viability of the two-state solution by stopping all unilateral measures that undermine its viability.
Is there enough incentive, though, in this deal for Israel and the Palestinians to hammer out a deal eventually for a two-state solution and a lasting peace?
If we want to have peace, that's the only path forward. And to those who, particularly in Israel, who are working systematically to undermine the two-state solution, the answer is, what is the alternative? If it is not the two-state solution, which the majority of the world agree is the only path to a viable, just and lasting peace, then what is the alternative? Is it going to be a one-state reality? If that one-state reality, it's not going to lead to peace if it's a reality of apartheid. Is Israel going to give Palestinians their full human and political rights under that one-state reality? So again, while as I said, while we recognize the challenges, the enormous challenges facing the implementation of the two-state solution, but we also recognize the fact, and I think the world is in consensus, most of it with us on that, is that there is no alternative to the two-state solution. So whatever it takes, we must remain united and work to protect the two-state solution and to eventually achieve it.
Tell us a little bit more about Jordan's role going forward, because I mean, you have already committed to supporting security in Gaza in the form of training and deploying a Palestinian police force. Where else do you see your role in shaping the future of the Gaza Strip and Palestinian statehood? How big a role will you have in this next step?
Look, we've been at the forefront of efforts to solve the conflict, again, on basis that will guarantee a just and lasting peace. Remember, Jordan signed a peace treaty with Israel over 30 years ago. Despite all those challenges, we remain committed to that treaty because we know that peace is the only path to guarantee the security of all in the region, to allow us to move forward towards a better future where it's going to be marked by cooperation rather than conflict. So in as far as Gaza is concerned, we've been working along with our partners to make sure that the war ends. We brought in a lot of aid into Gaza. We were a humanitarian hub before Israel closed the border to
But
the
are
crossing
you and
point.
other Arab states confident that you are going to be among the architects of what the future is? Do you have that level of confidence?
Look, I mean, we're in the middle of it, and ultimately it is our region, and we have to play a role in ensuring the security and stability of our region, and therefore we've continued to work extremely hard for that, along with partners. I mean, ultimately, we're going to need our partners in the US, we're going to need our partners in Europe, because all of us have an interest in overcoming that conflict and making sure that we are on a path towards peace.
Let's talk a little bit about security. You have acknowledged that you need to look at security before governance. So we have this Hamas delegation who was in Cairo over the weekend to meet with Gaza War mediators as both Israel and Hamas continue to trade accusations of ceasefire violations. How concerned are you that the ceasefire could collapse? That this first initial step, that you might not even get past it?
I mean, the ceasefire is being challenged. I mean, so far there are over 500 violations by Israel of the ceasefire registered. We've had about hundreds of Palestinians killed since the ceasefire came into effect. But again, there's no alternative. We just have to keep working with all to make sure that the ceasefire is respected. After that, again, we have to look at how do we ensure security, how do we ensure governance. But we have to be realistic here. It's got to be step by step. I mean, if we just put everything on the table now and ask for everything, it's not going to happen. So we have to consolidate and move forward.
So let's go to one of those steps. The peace plan says, and I'm just going to quote here, Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza directly, indirectly, or in any form. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons, production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. Do you see any conditions under which Hamas will agree to that?
Look, I mean, we have a plan on the table. We all know that the priority now is to rebuild Gaza. The priority now is to restore normalcy to the lives of 2 million Gazans who've suffered untold misery over the past 2 years and even before that. And I think Hamas has agreed it will not have a political role in Gaza. It has agreed to, within the context of stabilization and peace, to give up to make sure that there is the Palestinian Authority, the legitimate authority, will have exclusive control over weapons. So it's going to be work in progress. But I think ultimately, in order for us to be able to move forward, any plan for Gaza has to stand on a number of legs, if I may. First of all, ending the war, obviously, humanitarian support and early recovery, reconstruction, security, governance, and a political horizon.
It has rejected the requirements to decommission its weapons. If it doesn't do so, is the deal dead?
I think, look, I mean, there is an understanding that Gaza needs to be safe and secure for both Israelis and Palestinians. And I think we all know what the macro parameters look like. In terms of the micro details of how to manage that, that is something that's being discussed, and everything's got to be looked at as a comprehensive package. And again, as I said, we'll have to go step by step. Priority now, stabilize the ceasefire, get aid in, which is not coming in, by the way, in any sufficient numbers. According to the UN, the aid that's coming into Gaza since the ceasefire does not meet 20% of the need of Gaza. So again, we're dealing with a tremendous challenge. We're dealing with a territory that's been demolished. Over 80% of Gaza's households have been destroyed, or 90% of health infrastructure has been destroyed. So we've got to, again, agree what our priorities are, and then restore whatever degree of normalcy to life, and then talk about politics going further.
Another question with regard to security. Let's talk about Israeli withdrawal, the parameters of which are also outlined in the peace plan. It's linked to a number of security steps, one of which includes having this international stabilization force, which is meant to be the long-term international security solution. The peace plan says that it will consult you and Egypt in the development of this force. How close do you think it's ready to becoming a reality?
Look, a lot of details are going to have to be worked out. As I said, we have the Security Council resolution that sets the general parameters for moving forward. Now we have to work out the details. The details include how do we vet and train and deploy a Palestinian police that we believe must be in charge of the security of the Palestinians. And then you have a stabilization force whose main job we believe must be deconfliction between Israelis and Palestinians, allowing for Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, because Israel has to withdraw from Gaza. Otherwise, then we're going to have to continue conflict. So I think the challenge is how do we identify the scope of the stabilization force to making sure it's peacekeepers, not peace enforcers, because from what we're seeing that a lot of countries will be reluctant to come in as peace enforcers. So how do we work out the scope? How do we work out the scope of the Palestinian police that must be in charge of the security of Gaza, so that the stabilization force will really be a stabilization force in the sense of deconflicting between Israelis and Palestinians, and allowing for the creation of a clear timeline for the withdrawal of Israeli occupation forces from Gaza.
Indeed, one of the biggest questions is who indeed will be willing to go in to Gaza, because Hamas, for its part, it says it will consider the force a party to the conflict in favor of the occupation. You know, many are hesitant to deploy ground troops, as we mentioned, and we know that Jordan, you say that you won't send your own forces, that you're too close to the conflict. Do you see any circumstances where that might change?
Look, we in Jordan are too close to the conflict to be deployed on the ground. However, we are helping, as you alluded to. We can help with the training of Palestinian police. We can help with we're sitting on the CMCC right now. We can be helping with the training of troops, coordination for their activities. We can be playing a major role, as we did in the past, in ensuring humanitarian support into Gaza. So there's a lot that we can do and have been doing, other than deploying troops on the ground, which, again, given how close we are to the conflict, is not something that we believe we should be doing, because it just will not be the right thing to do.
So we talked about security there. The challenges seem quite clear. Let's speak a little bit about governance and the Board of Peace, which is to be established for governance, oversight, and supervision. Chaired by President Trump, with other members to be announced, including former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. Do you have guarantees that international actors, people from outside your region, will not monopolize decisions affecting Gaza's future? Do you need those guarantees right now?
Look, I mean, first of all, let's take a step back. It took President Trump himself to get involved to end the war. And we all know it was only President Trump that could have ended the war, and he did that, and that's a great achievement. Now, President Trump says he wants to make sure that he achieves peace, and we all support that, and we'll all be working with the United States in our efforts to bring about a just and lasting peace. Again, as for details, there are a lot of details to be worked out, and again, we'll talk to anybody. There'll be questions about who's going to be on the Board of Peace, what interfacing is going to have with the Palestinian committee that must be running Gaza, the apolitical committee that everybody agrees must be in charge of Gaza, decision making, all these things are yet to be developed. But I think the point of departure
What do you think the Arab presence on the board is?
I think the point of departure for us in the Arab world is that the war has to stop, humanitarian aid has to come in, Gaza must remain part and parcel of the occupied Palestinian territory, as in it has to be linked to the West Bank, because this is the land on which the Palestinian state must be built in order for peace to be achieved. So these are the parameters within which we're working, and of course, no displacement. And now a lot of discussions are taking place to make sure that we ensure the workability of the plan. I think, again, the point of departure is how do we make the plan more workable towards the end game of not only stabilizing, but putting us on a path towards just and lasting peace.
We mentioned that the peace plan calls for Gaza to be governed under a temporary transitional governance of a technocratic apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering, and this is a quote here from the peace plan, the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people of Gaza until the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program and can ultimately take over that governance. Who should represent the Palestinians in the immediate term?
Look, I think there's been a lot of discussion about that, and I think 15 names have been identified, and those names are being discussed now by all parties of the conflict. So 10 of them, 12 of them, 9 of them, will be, I think, ultimately chosen, and that will be the Palestinian Committee in charge of the affairs of Gaza. That said, we must make sure that there's a link to the West Bank, and ultimately the PA has to go back and assume governance of Gaza. So we're talking about transitional period, and again, this is probably, realistically speaking, this is a loss minimization phase where we stop the carnage, stop the killing, stop the destruction, stop the starvation, work the politics out from our perspective, move towards ultimately creating conditions conducive to the implementation of the two-state solution. So, and there are a lot of detailed questions. Who's going to be issuing birth certificates? None of us wants to see a reality whereby you have Gaza as a separate entity from the West Bank. We don't want to have two. They must be linked. Now, how do we link them is something that is at the heart of discussions in the conversations that are taking place now. But again, as we talk about Gaza, if I may, we cannot forget what's happening in the West Bank, because whatever we do to stabilize Gaza, if the West Bank erupts in violence, then we would have lost it all.
I want to have one more question about the plan, and this is a really big one because the scale of destruction in Gaza is absolutely enormous. You have the challenge of trying to convince investors, first of all, that the war is over and that they should move in. Amid all of that, you have some Israelis and Americans hoping to start reconstruction on Israeli-controlled territory. This is territory within the so-called Yellow Line. It's beginning near Rafah in the south, where Israel holds the largest chunk of land. It would create a so-called Old Gaza, and then that would be in the west, and then a new Gaza in the east.
Look,
do you accept that? Do you accept that?
What I accept is that ultimately Israel has to withdraw from Gaza. The Yellow Line is a transitional line that must not become a permanent line.
But where should reconstruction start?
Again, reality is going to force itself here, but we have to remember that you have 2 million Palestinians almost west of the Yellow Line. Mm-hmm. They are living in miserable conditions. They are living in tents. Quality of life is inhumane. Aid is not coming in. We've all seen the images of the floods pushing people out of the tents, which have become their life. So I think ultimately, again, we have all those ideas. I think if we all agree that what we want is to make sure that we stabilize Gaza, restore hope to Gazans, give Gazans their basic rights to a meal in the morning and a roof over their heads, then we've got to work out details in a way that achieves that. So again, you're hearing a lot of ideas being floated here and there, but I think ultimately we're all going to have to come together and do what's right. And basically what's right and what's our priority is at least to make sure that the people of Gaza who've suffered untold misery over the past years do not continue to suffer, and that's how we move forward.
You've spoken, including here, about how Gaza and the West Bank must remain an integral part of each other. October had the highest monthly number of Israeli settler attacks since the UN began documenting such incidents in 2006. That doesn't bode well for the future of peace and security, does it? And I'd like to ask you, in that line, I mean, you do have some pressure being exerted from the U.S. administration with Trump saying that the West Bank will not be annexed. Is that all falling on deaf ears?
Look, I mean, I think it was extremely important that President Trump said he would not allow annexation of the West Bank. And I think that is a major contribution to ensuring that we still have real prospects for peace, because what Israel is doing in the West Bank is ultimately undermining the two-state solution. Settlers are terrorizing Palestinian civilians every day. There is an average of 7 to 8 settler attacks on Palestinians every day, killing people, destroying their property, cutting their olive trees, preventing them from harvesting the olive harvest. All of that is simply pushing the West Bank towards explosion, something that we do not want to see happening. So I think the ultimate question is, if the whole world agrees that settlements are illegal, if the whole world agrees that those inhumane attacks on Palestinians cannot continue, then what are we doing about that? And that's where we've been working with our partners in Europe and elsewhere to make sure that there are consequences for those actions. Over 100 Palestinians were killed in the past few months on the West Bank alone. Settlers have killed over 20 Palestinians. Not a single indictment has taken place. We haven't seen anybody being held accountable. So I think attacks on the Christian and Muslim holy sites, the suffocation of the PA by refusing to pay their custom money, all that is pushing the West Bank towards explosion, something that is to the detriment of everything we're doing in terms of our objective to bring about peace and stability.
You, as Jordan, you were only the second Arab country to agree a peace deal with Israel. That was back in 1994. A growing number of Jordanians opposed the deal. There's rising anger over the Israeli government's actions in the region, some of which you've just highlighted in your answer. There's been strikes in Lebanon despite a ceasefire, strikes in Syria and Qatar, of which you have spoken against. You have been caught in between the fight between Israel and Iran and have struck down Iranian projectiles bound for Israel. With everything that is going on, how difficult has it been for your government to maintain that treaty with Israel?
Look, I mean, unfortunately, we're at the receiving end of every crisis in the region. That's been our history, but we've been resilient against all those challenges. We've maintained our peace, stability in our country. We've maintained our economic reform plans, but the pressure has been enormous. The pressure has been mounting. I mean, what happened over the past 2 years in Gaza shocked the whole world, not just Jordanians. Look at what's happening here in Germany in terms of public opinion when they see children dying because they don't have food and infants starving to death because they don't have baby formula. So the past 2 years have taken a toll on all of us. That undermined international law. International humanitarian law became a mockery. War crimes are being committed with very little action to address that. So it did have an impact on all of us. But that said, in Jordan, I think we have full clarity on what we want our region to be. We want our region to be one of peace, one of stability, one where everybody lives in peace and security together. And that's why, despite all those challenges, we remain committed to a just and lasting peace.
But the question, and perhaps you can give us a window here, is how concerned your government has been about the impact of the Israel-Hamas war on security in Jordan, because Amnesty International, for example, has accused you of restricting protests in support of Gaza, including the flying of the Palestinian flag. You recently banned the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, that was a very big departure from your previous policy. You also had the Islamic Action Front Party emerging as Jordan's largest opposition force in last year's election. And that was in part because of its criticism of the war in Gaza. How much pressure are you under?
No, look, the banning of the Muslim Brotherhood was not because of criticism of the war in Gaza. We in the government have been at the forefront of, criticizing and opposing and condemning the war in Gaza. That is a domestic issue. It has to do with law and order. Everybody who wants to be in Jordan must abide by the law like everybody should be in any other country. So the issue with the Muslim Brotherhood is related to them breaking the law, and we cannot allow the law to be broken. Our responsibility is to make sure that the law is respected and everybody abides by it. That said, protests have been all over the world, not just in Jordan. I mean, the whole, in Germany, in the UK, in the US itself, people have been protesting the atrocities that they saw happening in Gaza, and Jordan is no part of that. And we, of course, allow a peaceful protest, peaceful expression of opinion on that. What we did not allow was violating the law. So that's a different case here. But I think ultimately the war has put pressure on all of us. People are angry. We are angry in the government. His Majesty himself has expressed tremendous anger. How could anybody not be outraged when you see a child starved to death, when you see 70,000 people being killed, when you see 17,000 children orphaned, 17,000 plus children have lost an arm or a leg, and against that, for instance, one of the projects that we did was to send mobile clinics to help install legs or arms to kids who've lost that. And it took us a lot of hard work to allow that into Israel. So but basically what I'm saying is that the atrocities, the massacres that we've seen in Gaza have taken a toll on every human being who watched. And again, that made it imperative on all of us to work towards ending that atrocity.
I mean, it's undeniable that the cost of this conflict has been enormous. Nearly 70,000 Palestinians reported dead. 1.5 million people in need of emergency shelter items. Israel also having its worst terror attack in its history with nearly 2,000 dead, hostages taking, shattering its idea of security in the region. As a leader in the region, where do you find hope right now? Do you believe that a peace can emerge eventually from this hatred and suffering?
Look, it has to. I mean, ultimately, we all share the region and we all want to live in peace in the region, but time alone is not going to do it. We have to ask, why are we here? Why is it that conflict continues to be the reality of the Middle East? And I think that all of us are realizing that more and more. And I think the New York conference that Saudi and France put together, that saw over 140 countries supporting the declaration there, which is ultimately a declaration and a roadmap on how to achieve peace that will achieve the security of Palestinians, Israelis, and allow for all of us to cooperate on addressing common challenges: unemployment, creating future, restoring hope, education, technology, all environment, all of that. Ultimately, there is an illegal occupation of the Palestinian people and of the Palestinian land. It cannot continue. You have 5 million Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza. They want their freedom. They want to be able to go to school without their kids being checked 10 times on the road to school. They want to be able to invest and build and have education and eat. And, you know, they want the things that any child, whether in Jordan, in Germany, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, want. So ultimately, that is the challenge we have. We have an illegal occupation that persists. Ending that occupation is the path to ensuring security for Palestinians and for the Israelis, because again, the ultimate question is, if it is not freedom for the Palestinians in their own independent state on their land, that lives in peace and security with Israel, that is secure, accepted, and normalized within the region, what is the alternative? So when Netanyahu and some of his radical ministers who dehumanize Palestinians, call for their extermination, say we will not allow a Palestinian state to emerge. Okay, what is your answer to the fact that you have 5 million people living under occupation that want to live, that want their freedom? So if it's not the two-state solution, then what?
Ayman Safadi, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us on Conflict Zone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please stay seated. We have time for one question. I see.
I leave?
Please stay seated.
Okay.
Please. So we'll have one question, please,
Okay, I thought we...
from the audience. Apologies.
Good morning. Sabah al-khair ma'alik.
Sabah al-khair.
Karma Ekmekshi from Lebanon, Hassan Faris Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. I'd like to spend perhaps 2 minutes looking at your other neighbor, Syria. I believe that there's, I mean, it's not my opinion, but there's a conflict between the US policy and the Israeli policy in Syria, and, you know, Jordan being right there in the middle. How is Jordan positioning itself? And are you playing a role in the stability of Syria at the moment, which still remains a conflict zone? So perhaps a few actions that you are actually doing or playing a role in that, on that front. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. I really wanted to address Syria, but I think Sarah was very firm on driving the conversation. Look, I mean, I think Israel is in conflict not just with the American policy, but with the policy of the whole world vis-a-vis Syria. We have a new government in Syria that emerged after 14 years of devastation and suffering and oppression of the Syrian people. That new government took office and said it doesn't want conflict with anybody. It wants to focus on rebuilding Syria, ensuring that Syrians have security, safety, and a future. So what does Israel do? It comes and starts occupying more Syrian territory. It starts meddling in Syrian affairs in a very destructive manner. And again, to what end? The Syrian government said it doesn't want conflict with Israel. It's committed to the 1974 armistice. It's willing to reach any security agreement that will address the legitimate concerns of Israel. Of course, with Israel withdrawing from territories it has occupied after December 8, I believe. And yet Israel is meddling all of that. And destabilizing Syria is going to be the detriment of all of us. The government has to succeed. The Syrian people deserve to live in peace after all those years of of suffering. So we in Jordan have been working very closely with the new government in Syria, helping with the stabilization, trying to do whatever we can to support the rebuilding process on grounds that will ensure stability, sovereignty, territorial integrity of Syria, the safety of all its people, and the respect for the rights of all its people. And we've been working extremely well together. We're fighting terrorism together. In Jordan, we hosted a meeting of neighboring countries around Syria to make sure that we come together in fighting ISIS, which is trying to reorganize itself after the collapse of the previous regime, having acquired so much weaponry in the transitional period. We are working with the Syrian government on economic development. You know, Damascus is 1 hour away from our border, so we're having a lot of interaction, so there is a good story that could emerge in Syria. Of course, there are challenges, there are growing pains, given what kind of reality the new government has inherited. But I think we all need to come together, support a future of Syria that is peaceful, that is conducive to development, that will ensure that the suffering of the past does not happen again. And I think Israel, what does Israel want in Syria? And I think there could be a formula found whereby, again, Israel's legitimate rights security rights will be addressed, and the Syrian government is willing to do that, and all of us are willing to do that. And remember, South Syria is a national security issue for us. We cannot allow for Daesh ISIS to establish a presence there. And I think what Israel is doing in Syria is becoming a rallying cry for every radical to converge on that area and claim resistance and move forward. So I think we are seeing a good story developing in Syria. We're seeing the government focused on the right things. Again, challenges remain, they're aware of that. But unless we all come together and help them overcome those challenges, we're going to have a reality whereby everybody's going to suffer. Look at migration, refugees. We are host to 1.3 million Syrians in Jordan. Germany has a lot of migration from Syria as well. Those people will not go back unless their country is safe, secure, and conditions are there that will offer them opportunity to rebuild their lives there. So, and I think Germany and Jordan, we discussed Syria, and I think we're aligned also in our policy towards Syria. So the odd one out vis-a-vis Syria is Israel. And again, because Netanyahu's policy seems to be just to having conflict everywhere, because he does not want to face the internal reckoning when the guns go silent in Israel. So that is an issue that I believe all of us need to come together around and say, these are the objectives in Syria: a stable, sovereign, independent Syria that is safe for all its people, and see how we can support it. The alternative, if, God forbid, Syria collapses into chaos, all of us will suffer. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that there was only time for one question. Yes, okay, great, fantastic. I see Sarah nodding on the side. Ayman Safadi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you, good to be here.
And I'll hand it back to Sarah.
Thank you.